They didn't just trespass on my ranch. The HOA bulldozed straight through my family's land and left my grandfather's memorial buried in the dirt. So I did the one thing they never saw coming. I bought the very water source that fed their luxury homes and shut them off. My story begins on 240 acres of high desert ranchland in Wyoming, a place stitched into my family's history since 1948. My grandfather, Thaddeus, came back from war with nothing but a duffel bag and a land grant. He built everything with his hands, the barn, the house, and even the windmill that still creaks when the wind shifts at night. This ranch wasn't just property. It was memory. Every fence post carried his sweat. Every cottonwood tree marked a place where he taught me something, like how to read survey maps at the kitchen table. His calloused finger tracing lines that he said never lied. He told me, land doesn't lie, people do. I grew up chasing cattle under a sky so wide it swallowed you whole, believing that some places were sacred, untouchable. When he passed, I scattered his ashes beneath a cottonwood grove where meadowlarks sang every sunrise. That grove became holy ground to me, our family's anchor. For years, life was quiet. I restored pastures, ran cattle, and felt the land healing me from my own wounds. Divorce, burnout, a life I'd left behind in the city. Out here, time slowed, and every creak of the windmill reminded me I was exactly where I belonged. But peace doesn't last forever. And one spring morning, walking my fence line, I saw something that stopped me cold. Bright orange survey stakes driven straight through my grandfather's grove. That's when I realized someone thought they could erase my family's history with a pipeline. I didn't get a letter, no phone call, no polite knock on the door. Just those orange survey stakes, lined up across the meadow like a row of tiny fires. I pulled one out of the ground, my hands shaking, and drove straight to the HOA office 3 miles east. Ridgemont Estates. You couldn't miss it. Gleaming gates, manicured lawns, a clubhouse with more marble than a courthouse. Inside, the air smelled like perfume and chlorine. And there she was, Vivian Straude, the HOA president. 60-something, designer sunglasses perched on her head, acrylic nails tapping at her phone like I wasn't even standing there. I told her the stakes cut right through my land, through a memorial grove, through ashes. She didn't even look up. Relax, she said. We followed every legal channel. It's called eminent domain. My voice cracked. You desecrated a burial site. She actually laughed. A short, sharp sound. Show me a death certificate, she said. Ashes aren't legally interred. You've got no case. Her arrogance hit me harder than the bulldozers ever could. I'd seen plenty of corporate bullies in my years as a paralegal, but this was different. This was personal. I stormed out, heart pounding, my grandfather's words echoing. Land doesn't lie. People do. Back home, I walked to the cottonwood grove, the wind rustling leaves that sounded like paper maps. Survey stakes pierced the earth where his ashes rested. I sank to my knees, fury boiling inside me. That was the day I realized this HOA wasn't just greedy. They were dangerous. By the following Monday, the machines had arrived. Backhoes squatted on my meadow like yellow dinosaurs. Diesel fumes hung in the dawn air. Workers in neon vests hammered temporary fencing into the soil. The line cut straight through the cottonwood grove, the very spot where I'd whispered goodbye to my grandfather. The first scoop of dirt was like tearing open a wound. Sagebrush roots snapped, the soil split, and a bronze plaque I'd set at the base of the tree, the one with my grandfather's name, was ripped from the ground and bent like scrap metal. I tried to stop them. I stood in front of the machines until the foreman told me, "Ma'am, I've got orders." He pressed the plaque into my hands like a funeral relic. I drove home clutching it, shaking, knowing Vivian hadn't just stolen land. She'd stolen memory. Word spread fast. Neighbors whispered. The HOA spun their story. I was selfish, blocking progress, endangering families who needed water. By the end of the week, strangers were leaving voicemails on my phone, telling me to watch my back. Everywhere I looked, the land carried fresh scars, trenches, stakes, diesel-soaked soil. And every night, The machines hummed in the distance, pumping water to keep imported Kentucky bluegrass alive in a desert that barely got 12 inches of rain a year. But they made one mistake. One fatal oversight. Vivian assumed I'd roll over because I was one woman against a multi-million-dollar HOA. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 15 years dissecting water contracts in Denver. And out here in the West, whoever controls the water controls everything. And if Vivian thought she could drown me out, I was about to prove I could pull the plug. The first thing I did was call Hector Ruiz, an old colleague from my paralegal days. Hector was a water law attorney, the kind of guy who could smell loopholes like a bloodhound. "Pipeline through a burial site?" he said, voice tight. "That's desecration. We can file an injunction." We worked through the weekend, fueled by burnt coffee and adrenaline. By Monday morning, we had paperwork in front of Judge Kemp, a rancher himself, known for hating corporate overreach. My hope flickered back to life. But Vivian arrived with 3 attorneys from Jackson Hole, suits sharper than knives. They paraded in with geologists, anthropologists, even county officials. Their argument was brutal. No registered grave, no legal burial, no case. Then their kill shot excavation had already started before our injunction was filed. Too late to halt. The judge looked pained, but in the end, his hands were tied. Motion denied. The words echoed like a gavel slamming shut on my family's history. Outside the courthouse, Vivian walked past me without a word, just a smug little smile tugging at her lips. To her, I was finished. I drove home to find the trench deeper, the grove gutted. The machines growled like predators staking permanent claim to my land. That night, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by legal documents, maps, and my grandfather's old papers. My bank account couldn't fight their lawyers forever. For the first time in weeks, I broke. I cried until my hands ached. But in those tears, something hardened. Because when I looked at Ridgemont's water allocation contract, I saw a date circled in red pen. Renewal due. Overdue. That was the crack in their empire. A crack I could wedge open until the whole thing collapsed. I became obsessed. Nights blurred into dawn as I dug through dusty county archives, highlighted PDFs, and ancient bylaws barely scanned into legible files. Then I found it. An amendment from 1987. Any private entity consuming more than 500 acre-feet of water annually had to renegotiate every 10 years, or prove conservation efforts. Ridgemont's golf course alone used 620 acre-feet. Their last renewal? 2014. 10 years overdue. I felt my pulse in my ears. If a car registration lapses, you pay a fine. If a water contract lapses in Wyoming, you lose the right to use it altogether. But it got better. A senior water rights claim, dating back to 1904, was still tied to a creek-feeding Clearstone reservoir. That creek supplied 35% of Ridgemont's water. And those rights were about to expire if no one renewed them. I made calls, tracked down the LLC that owned the land but not the rights. The secretary on the line said casually, "We'd probably let it go for $80,000. Just clearing the books." $80,000. My savings was barely 22. I sat there in stunned silence, staring at the phone. This was it, the nuclear option. If I owned those rights, Ridgemont's pipeline became worthless. I could cut their supply legally, cleanly, without touching a single shovel. But it came with a cost. Everything I owned, everything I'd built, every cow in my pasture. I looked at my grandfather's plaque on the counter, bent and scarred. His voice whispered in memory, "Land doesn't lie. People do." If the HOA wanted to test my resolve, I'd show them what it meant to bleed for the land. The next morning, I listed 25 head of my Angus herd for auction. Watching them load into the trailer was like watching family leave. Years of breeding, gone in a cloud of dust. I launched a GoFundMe, framed not as revenge but as preservation. Help a family rancher protect water rights. Messages poured in from ranchers across Wyoming, Colorado, Montana. People who knew what it was like to stand alone against moneyed power. Within 12 days, strangers had donated $41,000. My neighbors slipped me envelopes of cash. An old rancher named Gil pressed a check into my hand and said, "Pay me back when Ridgemont's dead." By August, I had exactly what I needed, $85,000. Enough to buy the rights outright and file my claim. On August 10th, I walked into the county clerk's office and signed the papers. With one signature, 121 years of senior water rights became mine. When I stepped outside, the air smelled different. Lighter, like rain before a storm, because now I controlled the tap. And Ridgemont had no idea their empire was about to run dry. Word spread quickly. Vivian herself showed up at my ranch 2 days later, white Lexus crunching gravel. She stepped out with a manila envelope and a smile too sharp to be friendly. $150,000, she said. Cash. Walk away. I laughed. You think you can buy me? Her smile thinned. You have no idea who you're dealing with. People disappear over less. 2 days later, the Fremont Watershed Board hearing convened. The room was packed. Ranchers in boots, Ridgemont homeowners in polos, news crews lining the back wall. Vivian's lawyers argued first, painting me as selfish, vindictive, dangerous. Then Hector stood, calling our witnesses. Iris, the hydrologist, projected maps showing Ridgemont's massive overuse. Gil testified about property tax retaliation. And finally, journalist Ty Booker revealed the bombshell. Dalton Straude, Vivian's brother, sat on the water board and had approved every one of Ridgemont's allocations without disclosure. The room erupted. Shouts, gasps, flashes of cameras. Dalton walked out, red-faced, while the board chair slammed his gavel. When order returned, the ruling came down like thunder. Ridgemont's allocation suspended pending conservation measures. And my 1904 claim? Approved. Recognized. Untouchable. Vivian stood, her chair clattering to the floor. Cameras caught her storming out, middle finger raised. Her empire had collapsed, and I hadn't lifted a shovel, just a pen. Within weeks, Ridgemont's $4.2 million bond defaulted. Homeowners demanded answers. Vivian resigned in disgrace, fleeing to Arizona. Her brother faced state ethics charges. But the fallout wasn't just punishment. With Iris's help, the new board converted half the golf course to native prairie. Water use dropped by half. My ranch's pastures healed, and the cottonwoods sang again. Justice didn't come through rage. Came through patience, law, and sacrifice. I stood in my grandfather's grove, touching the plaque now set in stone. The pipeline still hummed underground, but it no longer scared me. Because I knew the truth, water remembers, and so does the land. Vivian thought money and power could bury the past. But the past has roots, and roots fight back. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your worst HOA nightmare in the comments. Petty rules, unfair fines, tyrant neighbors. Tell it all. The more we share these stories, the less power they hold. Because when communities speak, justice flows.